I hope this committee and the House will set that balance. Having said that, I'm going to turn the gavel over to my... I need to recognize Representative Villarreal, who came in. Welcome. Let the record show that you're here. Members, do you have comments or questions before we begin laying bills out? Madam Vice Chair.
Chair recognizes Representative Aycock to explain Bill HB5.
Don't start the timer, Dustin. Couldn't resist. Members, thank you for coming today, and I'll try to make this as brief as possible. I know we have a lot of people that want to make comment on this bill. I'm just going to tell you about the major provisions of the bill, and then we can talk about questions if y'all have questions, or I'll be available to talk afterwards. The major provisions. HB5 creates a single diploma. It gets rid of the minimum pathway. I believe it's important to do that because we don't want to track children into minimum pathways. I want us to move to a place where every child that gets a high school diploma is eligible to go to high school if they see fit. It increases that minimum 22 of our present minimum plan required credits to 24. It creates 4 endorsement areas: STEM, business and industry, public services, arts and humanities. And we propose that those be developed in conjunction with the state board. It provides for local course development in conjunction with community colleges and industries. We want to have the flexibility for each part of the state of Texas. If you have jobs in a certain area along the Gulf Coast, those jobs may not reflect the job availabilities in East Texas or the Panhandle or some other part. And we want those local communities to be able to develop jobs that fit their local community. It reduces the number of EOCs, and that's where the controversy hits the road probably. It takes it from 15 to 5. It gets rid of the 15% rule that's been so controversial. It gets rid of the cumulative score that's been controversial. And one of the most important things I believe this bill does is that it changes the accountability system. It changes it where a school is evaluated on more than just a test. I propose, and I'm willing to listen to all sorts of input today, that it be in 3 areas. My proposal is that those 3 areas be academic, similar to what we have presently. The second one would be budget and finance, how the school is doing financially and what they're doing with their money and whether they're solvent. I think those are important issues for school. And third, and perhaps new to the mix, is some sort of community and student engagement. And again, I hope to hear great testimony about that today. Over the years of being on school board, college board, and here, most of us have learned that when you show me a district where the parents and students are engaged, where they have input, where they feel like they have ownership in that school, I will show you a district that does well. If the parents and the students feel excluded and though they're not in control, I'll show you more times than not a district that's going downhill. So community and student engagement would be the third element. I propose that all 3 of those elements be given letter grades, and I realize that's a controversial deal. There are people in this room that hate the thought of letter grades. First, it's a little odd that the whole industry that passes out letter grades on a daily basis doesn't like letter grades. I find that fascinating. I am willing to hear testimony and think of ideas of ways to avoid those letter grades becoming a ranking system that pits one school against another. I don't want that to happen. If everybody gets an A, everybody gets an A. If everybody gets a D, they get a D. But I think that it's important to the communities to have clarity and have a letter that means something in each of those 3 areas that I've outlined. And finally, in that last part, I want to be sure that everybody understands that I want ideas about how we create that local input. I want that third letter to reflect the values and desires and goals of a community. And I'm willing to hear lots of testimony and ideas about that. So let me tell you now what this bill does not address. It's not perfect. It's not complete. There's some things I know that we've still got to work on. There's a whole section about impact on higher ed that's sort of plugged in there, but we know we've got to do some changes in it. It doesn't address the 10% automatic admission features. We know we've got to do some work on that. We know that there's an eligibility for Texas grants that's tied to student performance. We know we've got to do some work on that. And we know that we've got to have more clarity in that community engagement part. It's not easy to quantify student engagement. It's not easy to quantify community engagement. So we know we have some areas to work on that. But at the end of the day, I hope this becomes our committee bill, our House's bill, perhaps the legislature's bill. We want this to be the right answer and the right balance, as I said before. With that, Madam Chair, I'll answer questions and reserve the right to close.
Members, are there any questions for Mr. Aycock?
Man, y'all are easy. Okay. I would reserve the right to close.
Can we vote?
Representative Villarreal. Representative Villarreal.
I'll go easy on you, Jimmy.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. First, thank you for bringing us this legislation. I think it will become the vehicle for our chamber, and I look forward to continuing to work with you on it. You identified some of the problems that you wanted to tackle with this legislation. One of them that I know we've talked about has to do with the number of days that our children are required to sit in a hard chair and take a standardized exam, a simulation exam, a mock exam, or a benchmarking exam. We don't require those at the state level, but we now have very good documentation that that is an unintended consequence that is taking place, and it's crowding out the number of instruction days. How will your legislation limit that problem?
I think much of that's driven by the high stakes, as we call it, the priority that's put on how that district is ranked, how the students progress. I think when we reduce the number of EOCs, that will help in high school. We may very well need to come back on a different bill or an amendment or some other vehicle, perhaps even, to discuss 3 through 8 testing. Notice that this bill does not address 3 through 8 testing. This only addresses the high school portion of our graduation plan and our accountability system. And we will, I suspect, before this session is over, also deal with 3 through 8 testing through some other means, probably. The number of days, I think, tested are a function of the high stakes, the careers that are on the line, the accountability that's on the line. I think once we reduce that pressure, you'll see those numbers come down some. And I understand that you may want to restrict that by statute, and I think we're willing to have that discussion.
And are you, what I hear you saying is that you're open to addressing these important issues for all of our school children, regardless of age, whether it's in one bill or more than one bill, you're willing to get the job done?
My focus in this bill is, and I hope to remain, high school. My personal opinion is that we have about 123,000 present 10th graders who are headed to the cliff. But unless we deal with this problem before we leave this session, I believe we will essentially push out over 100,000 young Texans into a situation where they can neither graduate nor can they find the career training they need to become successful in an alternative career apart from college. I would like to keep the focus of this bill directed at avoiding that crisis. And in my other hat and another life, I'll be glad to take on other crises, but this one's important right now, and I'm going to try to keep this bill focused on that crisis.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Representative Hagerty?
Thank
Sorry.
you. That's okay. Mr. Chairman, we, as you know, spent a lot of time last session talking about testing, and we had some other issues that came up, but we spent a lot of time during the interim. And I know your comments were very good, and I know they were heartfelt for those who don't know you, about what we're trying to do for these kids, because for those of us that have kids in public schools, it is a significant problem that we're dealing with. You know, we just got scores released, I guess, yesterday or the day before from last year that we took. So, you know, we're already behind. I get the whole process of where it's, of how we, where the delay took place. But if you could just probably go in a little bit more detail, and this is more for just some of our newer committee members that are with us, on what we went through during the interim, on the testimony that we took relative to EOCs, and the fact of the matter that how important this is from a local control perspective, because we really, I believe, as legislators, have basically taken away the proposed local control that we used to have, and we're just mandating a lot of these things.
Yes.
And would this bill not give a lot more flexibility back into the school system?
It's certainly my intent to give local control back in a number of areas, both in terms of the course development for those locally developed courses, the flexibility to design some graduation plans that are not presently available, the ability of folks to develop perhaps in-house their own career technical courses that they're not presently able to schedule. I think a big part of our failure to offer more career technical courses, which everybody up and down the line, Governor, Lieutenant Governor, Speaker, and most of us believe we need more career technical courses, it's just real difficult right now to schedule those in. We don't have the flexibility available to those local districts. Even if they develop those courses and do excellent courses, they have a really hard time scheduling those into their present system. And then there's, as you know, the special ed issues that are of importance as far as local arts and what they can control and what they can't. And so those are also issues.
And while we, you know, maybe not everybody's going to agree with, you know, the entirety of the bill, I think conceptually, I do, by the way, but conceptually...
Well, that's nice since I'm your chairman.
and I have the next bill up on the...
And you have the next bill up, too, don't you?
But I think that... you know, we spent a lot of time listening to our constituents, which is our business, small business owners, but the moms, the dads, schools, and overwhelmingly, didn't we? I think we heard during the interim that, you know, help. You know, this is.
I'm not sure we heard many people say that it's just right the way it is.
That's right.
In my experience, both campaigning and here during the interim and listening to folks around the state, I've had very few people tell me that this is just fine the way it is and need to leave it alone.
Yep.
There are a few, but there are not many.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Mr. Chairman, just a couple quick questions. I'm going to ask you really to comment on a few things. First of all, thank you for your work. I know there was a lot of thought put into this, and of course, Representative Huberty referred to the work done in the interim that some of the new members weren't a part of. I appreciate that, and I was proud to sign on as a co-author.
Thank you.
And I'm going to be brief because I know we've got a bunch of folks that want to come and testify, and I'm very anxious to hear their input on this as well. But I want to ask you to comment on two pieces of if you will, heartache that I hear about, and one is that somehow this is throwing our hands up in the air with respect to rigor, right? And I think we'd all disagree that we are still setting very high expectations. Now, hopefully, we will provide resources so that our teachers and students can meet those expectations. So if you could comment on, I guess, your view on maintaining the rigorous nature of the high school diploma in all Texas high schools.
Actually, the bill moves up by 2 credits. And the 20% or so of our students who are now taking minimum plan will no longer have that option. So in that regard, it moves them up out of that, what I call a low track.
Right.
And I want to avoid that low track, and I want to maintain that upward movement.
Okay.
As far as the courses, the big controversy, quite candidly, has been about Algebra 2. Algebra 2 is the big discussion.
Okay.
My opinion is that we need more flexibility. Not every student, in my opinion, needs Algebra 2, and there's obviously folks that disagree with that. And we'll hear from some of them today, I'm sure, and hear their reasons why. But I think if we require the Algebra 2, I think we eliminate a lot of the flexibility to our career tech opportunities.
Right.
They simply will not graduate in many cases.
Right. You're not going to hear an argument for me regarding less math. That's why I went to law school. So,
I love math. I'm a math science guy.
I do too. The other thing, real quickly, Mr. Chairman, the other thing I hear about is the rating system, right? I mean, we're going from, the recognized, exemplary, acceptable, potentially to a more simplified A through F rating system. And, I have heard from a few, administrators, superintendents about their, again, heartburn with that. Can you explain a little bit about your rationale, other than, I guess, simplifying the process? I don't know if that's...
I wouldn't even claim that it's necessarily simpler. It will have 3 parameters to it instead of 1. I think the 1 parameter that we have now is not descriptive. It takes the worst performing subgroup, that takes a population group, sets it aside, and says you can only be as good as your worst performing subgroup. I think schools are better than that. And while I want them to focus on that worst performing subgroup, and I think that first letter, that academic letter, and the present indexing system that Commissioner Williams and his staff are working on will continue to press that. I don't want it to be the only thing that a school is considered on. I want it to be broader than that. I want to talk about their finances. I want to talk about their community involvement. And so to that degree, I'd like to expand it where it's not just a single one-word moniker.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all the questions.
What else? Representative Davis. Let me make this announcement first. For the benefit of the crowd, we have an overflowing crowd today, and that's very nice. I know there's a lot of interest in education, but I want to make this announcement that there is an overflow room if you'd like to go there. The room is E2012, E2012, if you'd like to have a seat while we are having this debate. So, E2012. Thank you. Representative Davis.
Mr. Chairman, real quick. I heard a statement earlier that we measure what we treasure. And then I think hearing from the TA last week, I looked at being new on this committee, so all that's new to me, but our performance measures of how we rank our schools, there was not, CTE was never really included in that, measuring that of how we rank our schools. So we never measured it.
The measurement occurs around, presently, the tax test, most recently, and will transition to other measurements in our new system. And that indexing system is shifting and is being worked on by TEA at this time.
Well, under your bill, would on the accountability, will you start measuring or inputting career and technical education? Would that be part of the accountability system that would?
I would certainly hope so, and I think that many communities would, in fact, include that in that third letter.
So that's the community.
I want that community to design that third letter as they see fit.
Okay. So they can custom make it for their particular area for measuring their schools.
If they want to include career tech in it, I'm all for that.
Okay. Representative Valeria.
Just to follow up on that, and would they be able to create would a school community be able to create that measurement, that third letter, or would it be district-wide?
Well, I would hope it would come down to the degree possible to the campus level.
To the campus level. Okay. So like my
now, the finance part is the part that might be harder to evaluate.
Sure.
Campus, depending on how district does their campus finance. But even that, I would hope would have some reflection.
Mm-hmm. But in my district, I have a lot of different schools, some that focus on dual language, some that focus on tech, and you imagine allowing the way this would be implemented is that schools could take kind of their emphasis and create a measure that's incorporated into the evaluation.
I would hope they would set a goal, set a priority for their community and their school, move toward that goal to the best of their ability, and have a candid conversation a year later to say, how did we do?
Mm-hmm.
and put that out for the community to comment on.
That's great.
Representative Radcliffe.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Mr. Chairman, first of all, thank you for your leadership on this. I think, and certainly before I got here, I heard a lot from the education community as well as our community in general about multiple pathways to graduation, and I think that's something that I know you worked a lot on in the interim, and I think we'll hear a lot more testimony about it and discussion about it today. But one of the things that I think I've heard, and I'm sure you have too, is about the different endorsements. If you'd elaborate a little bit on how we came up with those 4 endorsements and
I didn't. Those were brought to me by people smarter than I am. It was a group discussion of folks over the course of the past several months. I think there's clear evidence that we need STEM, science, technology, engineering, math people. We heard from folks, Representative Davis among them, that y'all needed business and industry type skills, and that we needed a different path that way. The fine arts and humanities people are some of our most creative thinkers, and we need that. And so we need all of these different components to allow a child the flexibility to go into which of those best suit their life plan. I think they hopefully have a discussion with their counselor, with their parents, with themselves internally, and say, this is where I want to go in life. And we want to encourage them to find that path, not say from the state, this is where you have to head. And so I want to give that flexibility is what I'm trying to do.
thank you.
Madam Chair, I'd like to reserve the right to close.
Thank you.